Hello, good evening. Welcome to Process Guy. Hope your Sunday is going on well. Okay, today will be very interesting because we'll be starting up with something new, which is CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet, and we're going to be doing live programming. So let's just wait for like 30 seconds while other people join us. We are available on YouTube, Instagram, Telegram. We are streaming live on those platforms. Okay, so you want to learn CSS. That's a series that we are starting up with. One of the things about CSS is that it allows you to style a design, to have your own design, whatever it is you want to picture in your mind. CSS allows you to achieve it. What is responsible for the placement of everything you are seeing on this site is the work of CSS. One of the very first thing you need to understand about CSS is how items are placed. The properties of individual item is very key. So before we go into detail, let's see some codes and then show you how our environment should look like when you are trying to do CSS for the first time. So I have my environment set up, a little bit set up. I just have my folder. This is my CSS folder where we have all my files because we're working on a CSS project. So everything is going to be inside CSS. By default is blank, and I did that purposely so that you will be able to start on your own if you want to do it by yourself. So the next thing I need to do is to create a new file, which will be index. If you've been following us, you will know that's the first file you need to create when you're creating an HTML page. So we'll do a little bit of what we already know, which is HTML, but just follow me please. We want to introduce something new which we've not seen before. So we have our body and we have our title here, which is supposed to house the title of the document we're working on. CSS, let's just say 1. So I also have a way for us to preview what we are doing so that as we're working, we're getting to see our example. Notice we have your CSS01 here as a title, just based on what we've done. So what I'm about to introduce is how to bring in style into the mix. So let's say we have our H1 and say this is hello world, and yeah, that's just to show that this is working. Now how do you then introduce your CSS? Before now I mentioned how we can style individual components, but I mentioned how we could style individual components by adding style attributes. That's in when we're doing HTML. You could actually add style attributes and you could style each of your components, but that's very tedious and it will not make your application or your web page very clean in terms of the code. So what we need to introduce is another scope here that allows you to specify style. So we have a style element. What that does is that anything you put inside here is a code that has to do with CSS codes. So that's what I wanted to introduce, the style element. It allows you to put in CSS codes. Okay, so what are the things you need to understand? How do I style a particular element? Styling an element requires you to either use the element tag name or assign it an ID, or use the place they are in the web page to define what they should look like. Yeah, all those things I just said now sounds like jargon, but let's go into it and see what's happening. So how do I then attach a style to this? First thing I said is you can use it by the name of the tag. We know that this tag is called h1. Then I can say h1 tags. All h1 tags should have a color green, and by so doing they will have color green. That's very basic. Before I go further to explain more, I need to explain how you need to know, oh okay, how do I when I mean how do I set the color, how do I set properties, how do I set the background, all these properties I need to explain how it works. So for every element on, if you've been following the video HTML series, you will notice we introduce a couple of elements. Each element has its properties, and all of those properties can be tweaked, can be modified, can be changed, can be dynamic. You can tell them to do a whole lot of things that you want them to do. So for example, this is a text, which is h1. h1 happens to be part of a text formatting tool that we have, and I'm going to introduce something else so that we don't have just one element. I'm going to introduce the paragraph element, and I say welcome welcome to my world. So notice that nothing is being styled on our nothing is being styled on our paragraph. So what I was talking about before was about how we get to know properties of what it is we want to adjust. So if you don't know the properties that is available for an element, you will not know what to do. So it's very key for us to know what are the things that are obtainable. So I'm going to add more elements so that we'll see the difference and we'll see what are the things that are obtainable. So we have another element there. So I think we should add a link just to spice things up a little. And by the way, if you guys have questions, I think I'll be able to take questions as we go. Let me see so that I can watch the question as they come in. Okay. So let's just tell this guy to go to Yahoo page. So that's 3 different components that we have there. Okay, you have 3 different components already showing there. So how do you give them style? What are the things obtainable that will make it look like something like this? You know, how do you then do a kind of effect that makes it look like this? As I've said before, this requires you to know all the properties. What are they called? Just for example, now I just mentioned color. If you did not know that to change the color of this, you need to set the property value color for it to change. So you need to go and there's a reference document which I'm going to share in once we are going into the CSS tutorial proper. When we start the series from 1 to whatever, I'm going to share all the available properties that are visible for each element. That way, if you want to do a particular thing, you can just read through the reference and see, oh, is this doable or not? So for example, now if you want to change the font, what do you need to do? You need to know the property name of what you need to do to change the font. So I have font family. So I do font family. Font family is the name of the property. That's the property name. And the value you need to set to it to change the font is, I have on my option, my system has already given me list of fonts, but you are free to type in any of the fonts that you have installed on your system. So immediately I do that, you can see that it changes to the font based on what it is you have specified. And this again is only attached to the H1 element. So of course we can't cover the whole of CSS today. The idea of today's CSS live presentation is to give you guys an idea of what CSS is all about and how it makes your work cleaner and easier. If you've noticed, if you've watched the series of HTML I've done, I've not introduced CSS. I just added it as a style attribute. So the purpose of this CSS is to make it different and make it clean for you guys to be able to appreciate the CSS well, language or scripts. So what we've been doing is the ability for us to say we have H1 and then style what H1 is and tell the entire system to be able to focus on only H1. Then how do you style maybe paragraphs? So we want to go ahead and style paragraph. So I will be introducing some properties which you guys are going to be using in your day-to-day programming activities. So I'm going to go to P, that's the paragraph. Note the way I'm picking the handle or the elements. The elements are picked based on the tag. So I said I want to style H1 and I just put H1 there. I put the style into this brackets, and each of the properties and value are on each of the lines, and the end with using semicolon. So the next one is the P, which is the paragraph. You can say, okay, you still want to set the color to be gray. Let's see what that color looks like. So notice that we have gray color on all the P's. So because we have 2P there, we have gray color. Then one thing I want to explain, or I want to introduce, which you guys will use a lot, is margin and padding. Margin and padding is a way to specify the distance between elements, the space that it has in the top, bottom, left and right. That's what margin is. The same thing with padding. So we won't have time to give you details about the difference, but they are quite related but very different in their execution. So you can see that the padding and margin has allowed you to move these guys together. That's the effect you get with that. So the next thing now is we now know how to style individual elements. But what happens if you have, like this case, you have 2 elements, but you want to style them differently? How do you then style them differently? So it means you have to be able to identify and say, this one, I want it to carry a specific name, and this one, I want it to carry a specific name. That's why we introduce class. Class, excuse me, allow you to specifically say, oh, this is first phrase. By the way, you can be anything. You can type anything here. So let's say F1. You can say this is our F1. You are the one that gave it a class name. So this class name can be anything. So therefore, you can come down here and say, because it's a class, you use a dot to denote a class. And you say F1 is equal to whatever you want it to be. So let's go ahead and go away from green and call our F1. Anything that has F1, you want it to be called blue. So immediately you do that, your F1 now becomes blue. I'll let that sink in a little bit. So that's what happens. So even though all P, which is these, are gray, Down the line, the browsers notice that there's an F1 that is supposed to be blue, and it makes that becomes blue. So that's how you can specify a class and style that class separately. You can even have this class, used by other elements. For example, our H1 can use this F1 class very easily. You just come here and say class is equal to F1. And guess what? What do you think will happen? It will become blue. Automatically, it uses what is here. And the way it decides what color to pick is the way in which you ordered your CSS. If our F1 should go up, it will focus on picking H1. I guess. Let's give it a try. Let's give it a try. So it's still using the blue. So in this case, if you, based on whatever it is you want to be the default, it's what you will go with. But ideally, the last component you want the system to respect is the one that should be at the bottom. Okay, so no questions. So we have 15 more minutes before we go into our program of the day, which is our giveaway session. But let's move on and continue with what we have here. So we're talking about the kind of selector that we have. So I'm going to introduce another type, which is stateless, to define different states of an element. Now, if you've noticed in some browser, when you take your mouse over some fonts or some character, they get to change color. So there's a way you can actually force those kind of effects to happen. And the way to do that is to have some key elements, which is you can specify a new form of how will I put it, an add-on, and say hover, for example. And you can see that immediately you do that, you can see what I've used to introduce it, column, then hover effect. So what that means is that if any element is tied to as a class F1 and you take your mouse over it, something is going to happen. So let's see if this will work. So if we go back here, so do you see anytime you take your mouse over the word to anything that F1 controls is or F1 is attached to, it's going to have this effect. So that's what is happening. So that's the use of the hover effect. So again, this is supposed to be an intro to CSS. We can't cover everything on CSS in one video. So let me do, but most of these effects you get to notice it on links. But let me just show more things. Let me go to decoration, text decoration, underline. And the reason why I know this is because I've been doing it for a long time. So that's why I have all these things in my head already. And that's one of the reasons why you need to do more coding often. So if you've been in this, maybe you read computer science, you've been doing this for you've been doing this, and then you want to get a job, you are going to be probed, you're going to be tested. So it's good that you should be doing some tests, by yourself already before you go and apply for any job. So this is an effect that we have here. Another thing again I want to quickly introduce is you can see our code. If we are dealing with a very big project, a very big file, our CSS is going to be filled up here and it's just going to be messy. So what I want to show now is how to introduce style sheets as another file itself, not attached to the current file you're seeing. If you want to bring it up as another file, how do you bring it up? So let's see how that is done. So I'm going to go to our folder and have a new file and call it style. Then we name it CSS. Note the extension style.css. In this place, you are free to put in your style sheet. So we cut all this style sheet that we have and we put it here. So you can see that here we only deal with CSS. HTML can accept HTML tags. It can accept CSS. Inside it, it can accept JavaScript. But along the line, to make things easier, we have their own individual files that you can house this code in by themselves. So what I've been able to do was to take CSS outside, and of course, what happens to the style? It goes away. So you can see the beauty of CSS. CSS is what brings style to your HTML page. So how then do we bring in this style? How do we bring it into the HTML? And again, we still do the same. We do it here. So we have a tag we need to introduce, and that tag is called link. So the purpose of link is to bring an external document into the HTML file. So we have a reference rel attribute, which will specify what it is kind of document you are bringing in. We say we are bringing in a style sheet, and the type, just for us not to confuse you guys, just stick to text/CSS. For the professional people out there, they know that we have more stuffs there. So where is the file located? We have it as style.css. So if we have that, notice that our style has been applied back to it. We now have our style on it again. This way you have a cleaner look. And this is what I normally tell people. You spend most time reading your code than writing. By the time your client call you back for you to make modification, you need to go back and then read what it is you've written. If you've not kept your house clean enough, you will not be able to read what you've written. Okay, another question that came down the line is locating your document. How do you locate your document that you have? What if it is inside a folder? You can see the way our style is just sitting down here. The reason why we didn't have to put a slash or column or find it is because it's just sitting in the root directory. So if it is nested inside another folder, most of the time those folder will be called asset. And inside asset, you can have another folder called CSS, because your asset are supposed to be documents that allows you to make your major file work. So this is where you have your assets, this is where you have your images, this is where you have your JavaScript. So these are advanced topics, but I focus on CSS. So I can move my style into my CSS and it's moved. But what happens to this? This will not work anymore. It's not broken. So I need to fix it by telling the system that the new file is in assets/css/style. So if I try it again, now the whole thing is fixed back. So these are ways to make your system clean. So I'll take questions. If you guys have questions, let me know. By this week, we are going into CSS. As I mentioned, we're going to introduce the concept. In each of the topics that we take, each of the concepts, we're going to be doing a live, or rather, we're going to be doing a website. So that way it makes it interesting, and you're going to be able to relate with what we have. We're going to be doing menu, buttons, and pick images, working with images, how to move images around, the kind of properties that we have. Someone called us over the week, so there's quite a lot of properties, and as you set them, the browser obeys. We're moving the whole of P, everything that's called P. That's why the whole of this moved. So the only thing you need to know now is the property. So once you know the property, you'll be able to determine what value is available. And one of the things that Visual Studio does for you is that it even aids you to try and see what is out there for you to bring. So when you type something, it brings up example of what you can have, and you can try them out. And HTML is very forgiving. If you do any mistake, it won't really scare you away by giving you crazy errors. It will not just render correctly. It will not just display. So this is a testing ground for people that are going into programming. As they go into this, they get to see how easy it is, and before they now start doing the serious work, which is the back end. Okay guys, thank you very much for staying tuned to this section. We're gonna go into our session for today to pick our winner of our giveaway. So we have this page, pick a winner, and let's go to YouTube to pick the video. Let's see. So we're working on this video. Okay, I want to pick the URL. Okay, so we do a fetch, and the idea is that it's supposed to get all the comments. So we have 7 comments like last week, and if we click on this, any name that shows up means that's the winner of this week's giveaway, and they are supposed to contact us for their prize or gift. Okay, so we click and we have Kelvin Emmanuel Atasi. So Mr. Kelvin Emmanuel, contact us, send us a DM so that we can get you your prize. So guys, we've come to the end of today's stream. Make sure you follow us on Telegram, we're on WhatsApp, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. Yes, we're on Facebook. We're actually streaming now on Facebook. Join us on Facebook, and we have a community based on popular demand. We are now on Telegram. We're on Telegram as Front End Web Development Center Process Guy, and the idea of that community is such that you could share all the we can interact and have comments. You can share your comments there. Any issues you have, the idea is that you're supposed to go there and put it so that we can address it, and you can also share with other people or see people of the same like mind. So we say you should go to see that. I think I'm bringing that to the screen now. So that's Process Guy. We also have Process Guy community, so you can also join in, and you can share your experience, and we can collaborate there. Thank you for your time. Do we have any question? No question today. No question today. So Mr. Kelvin, please get in touch. Let me see the video. Let me see the video again. Mr. Kelvin, get in touch with us. Okay, I'm trying to get to the comment section. Mr. Kelvin, where is Mr. Kelvin? Oh, okay, yeah, that's his handle. Yeah, Kelvin Emmanuel Atasi. So please get in touch with us. We'll be expecting you to send us a DM. Thank you guys for joining today. See you same time next week. We should be continuing our CSS, and if things